So, I've been asked this question a few times by some trauma informed therapists. And the question is, how do you treat borderline personality or clients with borderline personality symptoms aside for using DBT skills, right? One clinician in particular was telling me how some of her clients feel almost like pathologized or put in like this box of, you have this behavior, you have these tendencies, here I have to teach you skills, or you're too complex to work with me, so go to a DBT skills group. So I have two different pointers that I want to suggest, okay? So I have to say that I think that, not I think, clients who have borderline personality symptoms, presentation of having very chaotic relationships, taking things very personally, maybe sometimes being aggressive, right? Having very low capacity for disappointment, being very reactive, sometimes maybe being manipulative. What you want to look at is, um, you know, I guess I think from a somatic lens because I am a somatic therapist. And so, what we're always trying to do is to be looking for the child. You're always looking for the child state. You're always looking for like the young part inside of them or a younger inner child, so to speak, that's holding something or that's afraid of something or that's responding to something. So, when it comes to clients with the borderline personality tendencies or characteristics, I always get curious about like, where did they learn that they had to behave in this way? Or what was going on around them, or who were they around that they had to learn to cope in this way? Because I haven't met someone with borderline personality tendencies or with relational complexities that wasn't suffering because of it, right? Most of the time, the people who have these personality traits or the difficulty with emotional regulation, difficulty with mindfulness, challenges with interpersonal, relationships, is because they are, they have a real, often they have a very hard time, not just with other people, but with themselves, right? If there's a level of awareness, it's like, it's hard for me. It's much harder for me than it is for other people. And that's so difficult, right? And so one of the pieces that I think is important to look at is what's going on inside of them. So almost starting with this like, radical validation standpoint, because obviously what we know is like when people have this hypersensitivity or this like inner fragility, usually they were in environments that were invalidating, even if it was a validating environment. Sometimes it wasn't and it was abusive, but maybe it was just invalidating to who they are, right? We know that delivery doesn't always equal impact. So there might have been well meaning people, but the impact really landed in a painful way. But also, it could be the delivery was harmful or there was a lot of neglect. But I think there's two separate things. So, number one, when it comes to DBT, I know people have a reaction to saying, here, try this skill. I myself did an advanced training in DBT because I felt like I want to learn a lot of skills of like the mindfulness, right? Emotion regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, right? So I think that there's an important piece of DBT. Hold on one second. I just forgot the last module um, of DBT. What's the fourth one? Oh, mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, emotion regulation, and distress tolerance. Right, the stress tolerance is like when they're in a lot of distress. So I do have to say that the skills that I felt like DBT has to offer are incredible skills. Okay, mindfulness skills, those mindfulness skills from DBT, I've found very helpful. A lot of my clients have found very helpful. They're basically like creating a toolkit, right? I think the piece also, as well, of like the behavior chain analysis of like helping to understand what happened first, what happened next, what was going on, right? Learning some basic skills for interpersonal effectiveness. I do think some of the skills can be helpful. Now, when it comes to trauma or complex trauma or relational issues, I think that we need as well a deeper level of understanding and a different way, or maybe a wider way of working with clients. And so I remember I got consultation from an expert who works in dissociation and also works with clients with borderline presentation. And he shared with me a research paper that he did, and actually I'll link it below, which was all about like applying DBT to clients with complex trauma or with dissociative disorders, and how essentially you can't just apply DBT to clients who have complex trauma or with dissociative disorders, which means they have different parts of themselves, different levels of dissociation, because you might think a client is being resistant to treatment, but really there's a part of them that's being receptive to the skills, and there's another part of them that's totally checked out or totally dissociated or can't hold on to the skills. And so what's really important for working with like clients with complex trauma and have this tendency or these presentations of borderline is that we want to be a bit more nuanced in our delivery. How do we help the whole system work with these skills, know that there's skills that are being taught, why the skills are helpful, right? Can we learn some better ways to deal with life? Because I think that what happens is that sometimes clients who struggle in this way engage in behaviors and activities and patterns that almost cause more distress to their nervous systems or cause more chaos in their relationships. And it's not because they want to, it's just because they're lacking skills. So really working on educating not just the client, but like any resistant part, any part that's kind of turned off or a little like, abrasive, saying like, this is why it might be helpful. Could we just check if it's okay for your system or if there's any objections to trying some of these skills? Now, I think separate from skills, and I remember always raising my hand in DBT trainings, separate from skills, what's super important is the interpersonal piece, okay? And watching out for pathologizing those clients, because essentially when clients have borderline presentation, a borderline symptom presentation, to me, I think attachment. I think disorganized attachment. I think, like dismissive, avoidant, or anxious attachment. And so essentially what you're seeing, what I'm seeing is there's somebody who has always been terrified, or there's somebody who always felt really unsteady in their environment, and they've had to learn to interact in a certain way. Or they've always felt unsteady or insecure in their own skin, right? Even if it wasn't an environment, it's just like they're in such a sensitive nervous system that they were born into. And so you want to be thinking with a backdrop of like, how do we create secure attachment, security between their own minds and bodies, like them and their own mind, them and their own body, right? Being able to notice their triggers, helping them regulate physically, somatically, cognitively, right? How do we help them develop some kind of safety or secure enough attachment in the relationship with you? So it's going to be a very real relationship. You're not tiptoeing around each other. I do think boundaries are super important about talking about the limits of your work, the ways that they talk respectful or not respectful, how you're very human and like, hey, you looked at me in that way, it actually really hurt. And could we just talk about it? Or like, hey, did you notice? So kind of being real, obviously within the realm of professionalism, but it could get very, very real is like, these are the boundaries and this is what we're working on. But I think that there needs to be, right, developing that security between them and themselves, you and them, and then them and society around them or socially. Because a lot of what happens is that sometimes with clients with borderline tendencies, there's this pathologizing of like, we need to learn skills, and then inadvertently they end up feeling very neglected and unwanted. And some therapists are like, oh, that's my borderline client. It always lands the wrong way on me when people say that, because to me it's usually like someone with a complex attachment system who's needing security. Now, obviously, you need to know as a therapist, like, can I work with this presentation? Sometimes it could be a little, it could evoke some very intense emotions. There could be a lot of transference, countertransference, boundary violations. And so personally, like, I think what's really important, and I have this, but you can make your own, is you come up with, besides for in your services agreement, what defines like what you can do or can't do in therapy, there's boundaries of like, these are the boundaries of our work. And in order for me to show up 100%, I need, the same way I respect the boundaries, the time and the effort, and I show up and I'm taking care of myself and getting my own consultation, and I went to school and I show up here, it's your responsibility. We both have to be responsible to be respectful of this time. So like starting session on time, ending session on time, right? So just different boundaries, not being on your phone, like whatever the rules that you have are, not calling me on my home number, whatever boundaries you need to set. I think boundaries have to be exquisitely clear. And structure needs to be very clear in terms of these kind of clients. But I think coming back to it, if I think from like an attachment lens or a somatic lens, I think it's important. Yes, you could use some of the DBT skills. I might tweak it a little bit to really incorporate it for the client. so that they don't feel like it's like infantilizing, like, oh, here's your skill. It's more of like a hello. All of us who have sensitive nervous systems, or all of us have been through different times in our life where we needed skills. Here are some coping skills that I think that could help, or here are some tools that you might not have learned or could be helpful to help you learn. And also, let's work relationally, because I know with those kinds of clients, the relational healing is essentially the most important part. I remember a consultant once telling me, I was talking about working with trauma clients, and she said, clients who have had trauma, and she said the trauma is the easy part to treat. The longer term piece to work on is the personality. And so I just want to say that any of you who are working with clients who have personality struggles, trauma healing is not so complicated, meaning, yes, it takes time and we can help work with symptoms, but the piece where we actually end up working with our clients more long term, and that takes a lot more energy and effort, and like the heavy lifting, is working on the personality structures that were developed because of the trauma that they went through, or because of the neglect that they went through, or because of the nervous systems or the struggles that they've had. So just to validate, like if someone says, why is it taking so long for this person to get into a good relationship? Or, I thought we resolved this issue. You can help resolve trauma symptoms. Personality dynamics take a long time to soften. And obviously in your own consultation, you could look at what are the expectations for a client like this? What are your goals? And how can you help work with them? But from my end, I would say always hold like there's like skills, and then there's the relational piece. Yes, to having very good boundaries, but not from like a punitive place, but hey, I know there's certain sensitivities. I know that there are specific nuances in this work, saying to yourself, this is how I'm going to create this framework and this map so that we're having a framework for success. So that you are taking care of yourself, you're taking care of the client, and you're taking care of the work. Obviously, make sure you're getting good consultation based on their presenting struggles and symptoms and issues to make sure that you have enough safety to do the work. But I think being able to work with like the mind, the body, the energy, self-regulation skills, and interpersonal relationships is the best way to go.